Welcome back, hunters. Today we're going somewhere most lore videos are afraid to go. Not into the mysteries of the Great Ones, not into the secrets of the Healing Church, and not into the cosmic horrors lurking beyond the veil of Murgo's lullaby. Today we're going somewhere personal. We're going to examine you. The player, the hunter, the person who signed their name to a contract they never read and woke up in a nightmare they can never leave. This video is about one specific question. What happens when you try to escape the hunt in Bloodborne? And the answer, when you pull back every layer of obfuscation the game drapes over it, when you examine every ending, every NPC, every system, every line of dialogue, and every moment of deliberate game design, that answer is genuinely one of the most disturbing conclusions in all of From Software's work. Because the answer isn't that escaping is hard. It isn't that escaping costs you something terrible. It isn't even that escaping changes you beyond recognition. The answer is that escape was never available to you. The moment you arrived in Gehrman, the cage was already locked. You were already inside it. And every single thing you did from that point forward, every beast you slaughtered, every great one you felled, every lamp you lit, every blood echo you collected, all of it was the sound of the bars tightening, not loosening. Let's start at the very beginning. Not when you enter the clinic. Not even when you see the blood minister for the first time. Let's start before that. Let's start with the note. Somewhere in Iosefka's clinic, in the brief, disorienting moments before the werewolf finds you, before Gehrman greets you with that terrible familiarity, before any of the nightmare truly begins, there is a handwritten note left on a table. In the English localization, the note is described as a handwritten scrawl, and the authorship is never stated outright. Most players assume it was left by someone else, a previous patient, a sympathetic stranger, a clue from outside themselves. But the Japanese version of the game is more explicit. The note is described as written by the player character themselves, a detail confirmed by the fandom wiki's lore entries. Before the transfusion began, in whatever lucid moments remained to you in that foreign city, you left yourself a reminder, a mission statement, a goal to pursue when you woke up, groggy and altered, and more bound to this place than you knew. The note reads, "Seek pale blood to transcend the hunt." Think about what that means. You came to Gehrman already knowing, on some level, that there was a hunt to transcend. You came with awareness that the blood ministration you were seeking wasn't just medicine, wasn't just a cure for some unnamed affliction. It was a pathway to something beyond the hunt itself. You came with a purpose, with intention, with enough insight to understand that pale blood and transcendence were somehow connected. And here is the first and deepest cruelty the game plants in its opening moments. That note, that purpose, that intention, it becomes the seed of your imprisonment. You sought pale blood to transcend the hunt. But consider where that search leads. The note in the lecture building describes the moon presence as beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, and equates it with pale blood in the same breath. Pale blood. In an interview, Miyazaki acknowledged this reading directly, saying of pale blood, "Right, that's another interpretation. Pale blood is another name for the monster that comes from the moon." Note that he framed it carefully. Another interpretation, which is very Miyazaki. He neither confirmed it as the sole meaning nor dismissed it. But the reading that pale blood is the moon presence is the one best supported by the convergence of that lecture building note, the blood moon's pale color, and Flora's appearance descending from the moon itself. If that reading holds, then the thing you came to Gehrman seeking is the architect of the cage you're about to enter. Your goal and your prison are one and the same. You didn't arrive seeking freedom. You arrived seeking your jailer. Before you take your first step into Gehrman's blood-soaked streets, before you even see the werewolf crouched over those corpses in the dim clinic light, something happens that the game treats as background noise. A contract is signed. The blood minister, that gaunt figure with the cloth-wrapped eyes and the unsettling wheelchair, speaks with an ease that implies continuation, as though this conversation has been going on for some time, as though you both know the shape of things already. "Oh yes, pale blood," he says. "Well, you've come to the right place. Gehrman is the home of blood ministration. You need only unravel its mystery." And then, almost as an afterthought, almost as if he's confirming a formality rather than announcing a doom. Good. All signed and sealed. The screen fades. Character creation begins. The transfusion proceeds. You never see this contract. The game never shows you what you agreed to. You never had the option to read it, to question it, to refuse it. In the language of cosmic horror, and Bloodborne is, at its deepest roots, a cosmic horror game, this is the essential shape of the trap. You were already inside it before you understood what inside meant. The contract doesn't bind you to blood ministration. That's just what it looks like on the surface. The contract binds your consciousness to the hunter's dream, a pocket dimension created by the moon presence and maintained by Gehrman, the first hunter. Through this agreement, one you signed but never read, your soul becomes tethered to that ethereal workshop. You are given a form of immortality. You are granted the ability to return from death, again and again, without end. And that gift is the cage. Gehrman himself confirms the nature of your binding the moment you first arrive in the dream. He doesn't say, "Welcome to Yharnam," or "You've survived the transfusion," or anything that would suggest you're simply a patient who's woken up. He says, "Ah, you must be the new hunter." He already knows what you are. He already knows the contract has taken hold. You are ready before you've killed a single beast, before you've lit a single lamp, before you've understood a single thing about the world you've woken into. You are already a tool, a weapon, a piece of the machinery that has been grinding for longer than anyone still alive in Yharnam can remember. This is the foundation that every subsequent attempt at escape is built on. And it's important to understand it fully before we go any further, because the trap in Bloodborne isn't like the traps in other games. There's no villain with a face who imprisoned you. There's no key you haven't found yet. The trap is made of systems, of mechanics, of economics, of incentives, of the very structure that makes Bloodborne a game at all. And the first and most important piece of that structure is this. You consented. You signed. You came here seeking what trapped you, and you agreed to the terms before you understood what they meant. The note you left yourself says seek pale blood, not flee from pale blood, not destroy pale blood. Seek it, pursue it, move toward it. Every action you take in Yharnam, from the moment you pick up your first weapon in the hunter's dream to the moment you stand before whatever ending you've chosen, is an act of seeking. And the thing you're seeking has been watching you the whole time, shaping your path, making sure every road leads somewhere useful to it. There is one more piece of this opening that deserves attention before we move forward, and it's the first werewolf. The beast in Iosefka's clinic is not placed there by accident. Nothing in Bloodborne is placed by accident. This creature, enormous, blood-drenched, feeding on corpses in the dim light, is specifically sized and positioned to be almost certainly fatal to an unarmed, disoriented player who has just woken from a blood transfusion and doesn't yet know the rules. It is a tutorial enemy in the truest possible sense. It is designed to kill you, not to challenge you, not to introduce combat mechanics, to kill you so that the contract activates, so that your consciousness snaps into the hunter's dream for the first time, so that you meet Gehrman, so that you are handed your weapons, so that the hunt can begin. But here's what's fascinating. You don't actually have to die there. A skilled player, patient and methodical, can kill the werewolf with bare fists. It takes minutes of careful footwork, precise timing, and understanding of attack patterns that most players won't have on their first run. It is genuinely possible to never die in Iosefka's clinic, to walk out into central Yharnam without having ever entered the dream, without having ever met Gehrman. And the game doesn't care. It will still funnel you into the dream. The lamps require it. The weapons require it. The entire progression system requires it. The game has built a dozen paths to the same destination, and it has made that destination not a place you choose to go, but a place that the entire structure of play inevitably leads toward. You can fight the werewolf or not. You can die or not. Either way, you become a hunter of the dream. The trap has been laid with enough redundancy that no single act of resistance can close it. And that is Bloodborne's philosophy in miniature. the illusion of choice within an inescapable system. You can resist any individual moment. You cannot resist the whole. To understand why escape from the hunt is architecturally impossible rather than merely difficult, you need to understand how the systems that make you immortal actually work, and more importantly, what they require you to keep doing to function. Because immortality in Bloodborne is not a passive gift, it is an active demand. And every demand it makes keeps you tied more tightly to the hunt. Let's start with the most basic mechanic, death and resurrection. When you die anywhere in the waking world of Gehrman, your consciousness is pulled back to the last lamp you activated. Your body reconstitutes itself there. Your health is restored. Your blood vials and quicksilver bullets return to their pre-fight quantities. You are, in every mechanical sense, reset to a stable state. This is how Bloodborne works. This is how you make progress through the game. You die. You learn. You try again. You improve. It's the core loop. But what is this, narratively? Why does this happen? Why can you do what no other character in Gehrman can do? Why can you return from death while Alfred cannot, while Eileen cannot, any longer, while every beast and NPC you encounter stays dead after you kill them? The answer is the contract. You are not being resurrected through divine mercy or personal strength or some special quality you were born with. You are being reloaded. The hunter's dream maintains a record of your state, the blood echoes you've accumulated, the weapons you carry, the items you hold. And when the projection of your consciousness that exists in the waking world is destroyed, the dream restores it from that record. You are, in the language of horror rather than game design, a program that crashes and restarts from the last checkpoint. Your body in Gehrman is not quite real in the traditional sense. It is a projection of your consciousness from the dream into the waking world. When it dies, the projection dissolves. The consciousness snaps back to its anchor point. A new projection is generated. This matters because it tells you something about the nature of your existence as a hunter of the dream. You are never fully present in Gehrman. You are always simultaneously there, and in the dream, your awareness split between two layers of reality, your continuity maintained by the cosmic system that contracted you rather than by any natural law. The other hunters you meet, the ones who can die permanently, are more present in Gehrman than you are. They are grounded in reality in a way you are not. Your immortality is not power. It is a leash. The lamps are the physical expression of this leash. These streetlight structures, surrounded always by those pale, childlike messengers who writhe up from the earth to attend you, these are not simply checkpoints. They are anchor points, extensions of the dream's reach into the waking world. When you approach a lamp and choose to interact with it, you are extending the network of the hunter's dream, creating a new node in the web of the moon presence's influence, giving your consciousness one more place to snap back to when the body it inhabits is destroyed. Consider what this means at scale. Over the course of a full playthrough, you activate perhaps 30 to 40 lamps scattered across Gehrman, the Forbidden Woods, the Nightmare Frontier, Yahar'gul, and every other region. Each one is a new anchor point. Each one is a new tether. By the time you reach the endgame, your consciousness is threaded through the entire geography of Gehrman's nightmare, lashed to the waking world at 30 different locations, pulling you back whenever death tries to sever the connection. You haven't been exploring Gehrman. You have been colonizing it with the dream's reach, one lamp at a time. And here the game gives us something genuinely disturbing that most players overlook. There is one lamp in the entire game that has been destroyed. In Yahar'gul, the unseen village, after the blood moon rises, and the world shifts into its more nightmarish configuration, the lamp in Hypergean Gal is permanently broken. It's the only one. The leading theory, supported by the presence of the hostile trio of old hunters who patrol that area, is that they destroyed it deliberately, that they understood the mechanics of the dream well enough to know that destroying a lamp is a way of severing a hunter's escape route, of trapping them in that location. Think about what that means. The hunters of the dream are not the only ones who understand how the prison works. There are forces within Gehrman that comprehend the dream's architecture, its reliance on physical anchor points, its need for the messengers to maintain connections, and that work to counteract it, to block the exits, to trap the hunters of the dream in specific locations by eliminating their ability to retreat. The cage has people working to keep it locked from both the inside and the outside. Now let's talk about blood echoes, because this system is perhaps the most elegant expression of the hunt's inescapability. Blood echoes are the currency of Bloodborne. You earn them by killing enemies. You spend them on leveling up, on purchasing items, on upgrading equipment. When you die, you drop all your accumulated echoes at the point of death. If you die again before reclaiming them, they're gone forever. This is not, as many players treat it, just a tension-building mechanic. It is a narrative statement about the nature of the dream's economy. Blood echoes are, as the doll explains, condensed experiences, moments of insight and growth crystallized into a transferable resource. When you kill a beast and collect its echoes, you are harvesting the fragments of whatever awareness that creature once had, whatever human soul still flickered within the beast it had become. The doll can then channel these harvested fragments of consciousness to make you stronger, faster, more capable. You are feeding on the remnants of humanity to grow more powerful, and that power, that growth, exists for one purpose: to make you a better hunter, to send you back into the nightmare more capable of surviving it, more capable of killing more efficiently, more capable of collecting more echoes from more enemies, so that you can grow stronger still. The economy of the dream is a self-perpetuating engine of violence. Every act of growth requires killing. Every act of killing produces growth. And the whole machine operates in service of the hunt. The insight system sits atop all of this as both reward and curse. Insight represents your character's growing awareness of the true nature of Yharnam, the cosmic truths behind the blood plague, the reality of the Great Ones, the actual mechanics of the hunter's dream. The more insight you carry, the more you can perceive that was previously hidden. The amygdala clinging to buildings, the true forms of certain enemies, the additional dimensions of boss fights like Murgo's wet nurse. But insight also makes you more vulnerable to frenzy, the madness-inducing status effect that can kill you almost instantly if the meter fills. The more you understand, the more dangerous your situation becomes. Ignorance is, in the most literal mechanical sense, protective in Bloodborne. Hunters who don't think too deeply, who don't accumulate insight, who don't seek to understand the cosmic architecture of their imprisonment, they are safer from being broken by that very understanding. And yet you need insight to progress. You need insight to animate the doll. You need insight to access certain content. You need insight to purchase from the special shop. The game rewards insight. It creates pathways that require insight. It builds its entire late game around the accumulation of cosmic awareness. But that accumulation costs you something real and mechanical. It puts you constantly at risk of a madness that can kill you before you can act. This is the trap expressed in pure game design language. The road to understanding your imprisonment makes you more vulnerable to being destroyed by it. Every step toward comprehending the cage is a step toward the thing that breaks minds. You are incentivized to seek insight, and seeking insight damages you. You are incentivized to understand, and understanding kills. This is Lovecraftian philosophy encoded into a leveling system. It is brilliant, and it is horrifying, and it is not an accident. Every mechanic in Bloodborne is a nail in the door of the cage. Every system is a bar on the window. The genius of it all is that these bars are made of things you want: power, knowledge, progress, understanding. You're not being imprisoned by things you fear. You're being imprisoned by the very things that drive you forward. The first time you arrive in the hunter's dream, you are almost certainly just glad to be somewhere safe. After the grim clinic, after the werewolf, after however you died or didn't die in Iosefka's clinic, after catching your first glimpse of Yharnam's blood-drenched streets, that gothic architecture, that sulfur-smelling fog, those wet cobblestones in the lamplight, the hunter's dream feels like rescue, like exhaling after holding your breath. The hills are covered in pale flowers. The light is soft and twilight gentle. The workshop stands warm and inviting, its windows glowing with amber lamplight. The messengers, strange as they are, seem welcoming. The doll, once she animates with your first point of insight, speaks in a voice of such gentle care that players frequently report feeling protective of her before they've exchanged 5 sentences. This is intentional. Every detail of the hunter's dream is designed to feel like safety after horror. And the horror of that design is this. It is a cage dressed in sanctuary. Everything that makes the dream feel like home is also a mechanism that makes you a more effective instrument of the hunt. Let's take each feature in turn. The awakening headstones, the markers scattered across the dream's landscape that allow you to instantly travel to any lamp you've activated in the waking world, are presented as a convenience, a means of efficient travel, a reward for thorough exploration of Yharnam's geography. And functionally, they are all of those things, but they are also a constant reminder that your presence in the dream is temporary, tactical, preparatory. You don't live in the dream. You pass through it. You use it as a staging ground before returning to the hunt. The headstones don't say, stay here and rest. They say, choose where to go kill next. The workshop itself contains every tool you need to become a more lethal hunter. The ability to upgrade weapons using bloodstone shards, chunks, and rocks. The ability to install blood gems that enhance your weapon's properties. The ability to store and swap equipment. The doll, when you give her your blood echoes, translates them into increased strength, vitality, endurance, arcane power, all the attributes of a better killer. Every service available in the hunter's dream is in service of making you more effective in the waking world's violence. There is no feature of the dream that makes the dream itself more livable. There is no comfort that doesn't point outward, back toward Yharnam, back toward the hunt. The dream has hundreds of headstones scattered across its hills. The community has counted well over 300, many suggesting the number approaches or exceeds 400 across the landscape. Most of them are dull and unremarkable, marking hunters whose names have been forgotten, hunters who were contracted to the dream in previous hunts, across previous years or decades or possibly centuries, and who are now nothing more than stone markers. Some of them glow and pulse, indicating hunters currently active in the waking world, other players in multiplayer terms, but within the fiction, other hunters of the dream pursuing their own contracted obligations somewhere in the nightmare of Yharnam. You are walking through a cemetery every time you explore the dream. You are surrounded by the graves of everyone who came before you and didn't make it out. The dream is not just your sanctuary, it is the resting place of hundreds of people who were trapped exactly as you are trapped now, who hunted exactly as you hunt now, and who are gone, their specific stories dissolved into generic stone and the general tragedy of the hunt's eternal repetition. There is a note in the dream's workshop, on the upper floor near the altar, that most players miss because it requires deliberate exploration to find. It reads, "To escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of the spreading scourge of beasts, lest the night carry on forever." 3 words in that note deserve emphasis: dreadful and escape and forever. The dream is described as dreadful. This is not a neutral description. It is not the hunter's dream, or this place, or this realm. It is the dreadful hunter's dream, terrible, worthy of dread, a place to be escaped from, not sought out. And yet, by the time you find this note, if you find it, you have probably already come to think of the dream as home, as safety. The note is telling you something your comfort in the dream has worked very hard to make you forget. Then there is the doll herself, and of all the dream's features, she is perhaps the most insidious, because she is genuinely kind. She is not performing kindness. She is not wielding warmth as a manipulation tactic in any conscious sense. She cares for the hunters who pass through the dream. She is pleased when they return. She mourns them when they're lost. And she is, in that care and warmth, the perfect finishing touch on the cage. The friendly face that makes a prison feel like a home. The comforting presence that makes you want to return after every death, rather than rage against the system that keeps resurrecting you. If you are patient and fortunate, the doll will sometimes do something that shatters the comfortable fiction of the dream entirely. Under conditions the community has never fully been able to pin down, the trigger appears rare and possibly random, though returning to the dream with a large hall of blood echoes seems to help. You'll find her kneeling at one of the graves scattered through the landscape, her head bowed in prayer. If you approach quietly enough to hear, she is saying, "O Flora, of the moon, of the dream, O little ones, O fleeting will of the ancients, let the hunter be safe, let him find comfort, and let this dream, his captor, foretell a pleasant awakening, be one day a fond, distant memory." And then there's the doll. She knows. She has always known. She calls the dream his captor. She prays that it becomes a fond, distant memory, implying she understands that for most hunters, it won't be. That most hunters will not experience the gentle release she's praying for. And her hope that the dream becomes something remembered fondly from a distance suggests she knows most endings aren't that clean. This is among the most heartbreaking moments in all of Bloodborne, and it is hidden behind a set of conditions that most players will never meet. The game buries its most honest moment of self-awareness in an optional prayer that requires specific investment to witness. The cage knows it is a cage. The doll knows you are a prisoner, and the best she can offer is compassion, not liberation, not a key, not even information that would help you understand what you're dealing with. Just grief, offered quietly, to whoever is listening. There is one more aspect of the dream's architecture worth examining before we move on, and it is the most mechanically honest thing the game does. The dream will not let you stay. The game does not give you a rest option, a remain in the dream choice, or any way to refuse re-entry into Gehrman once you've prepared. The only choices the headstones offer are where to return to, not whether to return. The only things to do in the dream are things that require you to eventually leave the dream and return to hunting. You can prepare indefinitely, but preparation without purpose is not an option the game allows. A cage is not merely a place that hurts you. A cage is a place you cannot leave, and the hunter's dream, beautiful and sorrowful and warm as it is a place from which departure into the waking world is inevitable, because every feature of the dream exists to push you back out into Gehrman, and there is no feature, no dialogue option, no mechanic that allows you to simply stay. If you want to understand what you're trapped inside, study the man who has been trapped in it longest. Gehrman, the first hunter, has been in the hunter's dream for what the game implies has been decades, possibly longer, given the distorted way time functions in that pocket dimension. He sits in his ornate wheelchair for most of your journey. His right foot is missing, replaced by a wooden peg, and he wears the weathered garb of a hunter from a previous era. The leather jacket, the tattered mantle, the wide-brimmed hat. He has long grey hair and the face of a man who has not slept well in years. He carries a cane. He seems, at first acquaintance, frail. Do not be deceived. Gehrman is one of the greatest hunters in Gehrman's history. He invented the trick weapon, specifically the burial blade, that curved sword that transforms into a massive scythe, which served as the template for every trick weapon that followed. His workshop, the one the hunter's dream is modeled after, was the primary training ground for Gehrman's hunters before Lawrence founded the Healing Church and established the Healing Church workshop under Ludwig. He trained countless hunters over his career, including Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, a noblewoman from Canehurst, one of the most gifted hunters who ever lived, and the woman whose face the doll wears. The doll's resemblance to Maria, combined with dialogue and item descriptions, suggests Gehrman's feelings went well beyond mentor and student. Though the game never states this directly, it builds the implication across dozens of careful details. Understanding Gehrman's history with Maria is essential to understanding how he ended up where he is. Because Gehrman's binding to the hunter's dream is not the result of strategic planning or cosmic negotiation conducted from a position of power. It is the result of grief, of loneliness, item descriptions, and the doll's very existence point toward a man who cared deeply about Maria, possibly in the way someone cares about another who doesn't reciprocate in kind. He made a desperate bargain without understanding the terms, which is, now that you think about it, exactly what you did when you signed the contract that bound you here. Maria did not return Gehrman's feelings. She was determined, headstrong, defined by her own sense of duty and justice. When the hunters from Gehrman's workshop including Maria and others, traveled to the fishing hamlet to slaughter its inhabitants in pursuit of eyes and cosmic knowledge. Maria was so horrified by what they did, by the mass murder of an isolated community whose only crime was proximity to a beached Great One, that she threw away her weapon and swore off hunting entirely. She became a caretaker at the research hall, tending to the patients who had been experimented on by the healing church's scholars, trying to atone for what she'd participated in. And then she was gone. The exact nature of Maria's end is one of Bloodborne's most deliberate silences. She died, or disappeared, or passed into the hunter's nightmare, where she awaits as Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower. The game doesn't specify, and the ambiguity is the point. But the outcome is the same. She was gone, and Gehrman was left in his workshop, alone, aging, no longer central to the church's hunting apparatus, surrounded by the tools of a trade he could no longer fully conduct. He carved a doll in Maria's likeness. He dressed it carefully in clothes he made himself. He placed it in the workshop, and it sat there, inanimate and cold, a memorial rather than a companion. In his loneliness and grief, Gehrman made contact with the moon presence. The details of how this contact was established are deliberately obscured. Some notes suggest Lawrence was involved, that he and his associates, including Gehrman, beckoned the moon presence through some ritual or cosmic knowledge gained from the fishing hamlet massacre. What we know is that the moon presence, in response to Gehrman's need, created the hunter's dream. It modeled the dream after Gehrman's abandoned workshop, down to intimate details that only Gehrman would know or care about. It animated the doll, giving her life within that space. It gave Gehrman a companion, a purpose, a beautiful place to exist apart from Yharnam's horrors. The price. Gehrman became the host of the dream, bound to it eternally, unable to die, unable to leave, forced to serve as guide and mentor to every hunter who would be contracted to the dream in the decades and centuries that followed. He thought he was accepting a gift. He discovered he'd signed a contract for eternal servitude. The doll that came to life was not Maria. She had Maria's appearance, Maria's voice, some of Maria's mannerisms, but she lacked Maria's fire, her determination, her refusal to be gentle when directness was needed. The doll is kind and supportive in the ways that Gehrman, based on how the dream was shaped, seems to have wanted, though what exactly he hoped for from a simulacrum of his student is something the game leaves to implication. The doll's clothing, crafted with evident care, is a telling detail. Someone spent considerable time ensuring she was dressed beautifully. And yet in the moments we can observe Gehrman, there is no warmth between them, only the distance of a man reminded daily of what he cannot have. When Gehrman is awake and addressing you directly, he performs his function. He is professional, dutiful, the veteran hunter, welcoming a new recruit. But when he sleeps, and he sleeps more and more as your journey progresses, slumped in his wheelchair in the garden behind the workshop, visible and audible if you pass close enough, his true feelings emerge in fragments. "Oh, Lawrence, what's taking you so long? I've grown too old for this, of little use now, I'm afraid." He is waiting for Lawrence to come and free him, to fulfill some promise made when the dream was created. But Lawrence is beyond reach. He succumbed to the very scourge he helped unleash, becoming the first cleric beast, and was put to death. His soul was dragged into the hunter's nightmare as punishment for his role in the fishing hamlet massacre, and his skull placed on an altar in the Grand Cathedral as an object of worship. He cannot help anyone anymore, and Gehrman doesn't know this, or knows but cannot incorporate the knowledge into his dreaming mind. So he waits in an endless present, calling out to someone who has been gone for longer than most people live. The fuller version of his sleep talk, which triggers at high enough insight after certain story progression, adds another name to the desperate roll call. "Oh, Lawrence, Master Willem, somebody help me. Unshackle me, please, anybody. I've had enough of this dream. The night blocks all sight. Oh, somebody, please." Master Willem, Provost of Bergenworth, the scholar under whose wing both Lawrence and Gehrman once moved, the man who sent hunters to the fishing hamlet, the man now trapped at Bergenworth himself in a different kind of diminishment. Two old associates, both unreachable, both unable to answer the plea that has apparently been running for decades or longer. The specific faces that might have offered rescue have dissolved into the background of the begging, which is itself the horror. He's not asking for Lawrence or Willem specifically anymore. He's asking for somebody. The names have become placeholders for a hope that has long since exhausted its specificity. He no longer believes in particular rescuers. He has been begging long enough that all that remains is the raw, undirected need. Unshackle me, please. Anybody, I've had enough of this dream. Unshackle me. He sees the dream as literal chains. He does not experience the pale flowers and the doll's gentle care as the sanctuary they were designed to resemble. He experiences them as the walls of a cell he has been confined to for longer than any human being was meant to endure. The beauty of the dream is not comfort to him anymore. It is the aesthetically sophisticated decoration of a prison. And then there's this. I've had enough of this dream. Gehrman is not dramatic. He is not performing suffering for your benefit. He is not making a philosophical point. He is a tired old man who has been trapped for a very long time and wants it to stop. He has had enough. That phrase, had enough, is not the language of tragedy. It is the language of exhaustion. The kind of quiet, bottomless weariness that comes from too many years of an existence you cannot end. This is the person who runs the hunter's dream. This is your guide, your host, the man who welcomes every new hunter to the cage with professional courtesy and then weeps in his sleep for the person who might have freed him decades ago. This is what the moon presence does to the people it uses. Not spectacular torment, not cosmic punishment, just the slow grinding attrition of endless servitude, the way a rope doesn't cut but wears through if given enough time. When the end comes, when you've defeated Murgo's wet nurse, when you've returned to find the workshop burning, when Gehrman is standing beneath the great tree in the previously locked garden, he offers you something that most players experience as a threat. He tells you that the night and the dream were long, that your contract is fulfilled, and he asks if you intend to sleep. Then he offers his blade, the chance to accept death, to sever the connection to the dream through Gehrman's killing stroke, and to wake in the real world as the sun rises. This is not a threat. This is the only gift Gehrman has left to give. He is trying to do for you what no one has ever been willing to do for him. Provide a graceful exit, a clean death, a release from the cage before it becomes your permanent address. And what is extraordinary, what is the most honest thing the game shows about the nature of this prison, is that when you refuse, when you tell him you won't submit, when you stand and choose to fight, the expression that crosses Gehrman's face before he stands and readies his burial blade is not anger. It is sadness. He says, "Dear, what was it? The hunt, the blood, or the horrible dream? Oh, it doesn't matter. It always comes down to the hunter's helper, to clean up after these sorts of messes. Vor. Itonin daladesesai. Entelva, to clean up after these sorts of messes. He calls what is about to happen a boss fight, cleaning up a mess. Because to him, that's what it is. He tried to give you mercy, and you refused it. And now he has to force the issue, has to fight you into the release you won't accept voluntarily. This is an act of love expressed as violence, and the game communicates it through music as much as dialogue. The score for the Gehrman fight, Gehrman, the first hunter, swells with melancholy rather than menace. There is no triumph in this music. There is only sorrow when you defeat Gehrman, when you strike him down for the last time, and he crumples in the pale flowers. His final words are 3. The night and the dream were long. Pilagria his lower his life flame fly. It's cuff. The night and the dream were long. And for the first time in how long, there is relief in his voice. You have freed him. By killing him, by refusing his mercy, and then forcing him into combat that he could only lose, you have given him the death he could not give himself. He is no longer the host of the dream. He can finally stop waiting. The tragedy of Gehrman is not that he was a villain. He was a grieving man who made a desperate bargain and discovered it was an eternal trap. And then he spent his imprisonment trying, imperfectly, with the tools available to a man bound to a role he cannot escape, to be useful to the people the trap kept capturing. He is the most human thing in Bloodborne's cosmic horror, and his suffering is the most accessible expression of what the hunt does to the people it uses. Look at him. Look at what you will become in one of the 3 endings if you're not careful. Now look at what the 3 endings actually offer, because we've been building toward this moment, and it is time to examine whether any of them constitute what they're presented as. At the end of every Bloodborne playthrough, after you've defeated Murgo's wet nurse and silenced the terrible crying of the invisible infant Great One, you're presented with what the game frames as a choice. 3 possible endings, determined by your decisions and the preparations you've made. The game positions these endings as meaningfully different outcomes, as the difference between death and transcendence, between servitude and liberation, between escape and something more. What they actually are, examined carefully, and without the emotional weight of arriving at them after 30 hours of harrowing play, is 3 different cells in the same prison, 3 different expressions of the same fundamental truth. The hunt does not end. It continues, and whatever you become at the conclusion of your playthrough, you are still part of it. The Yharnam Sunrise, death as release. The first ending, widely considered the normal ending, the one you receive by accepting Gehrman's offer of a merciful death, is called Yharnam Sunrise. The sequence is simple, even gentle. You kneel before Gehrman. He approaches with the burial blade in scythe form. With one clean cut, he severs the connection between your consciousness and the hunter's dream, releasing you from the contract through the mechanism of death. The screen goes dark. You wake somewhere in Yharnam as the sun rises, bells ringing in the distance. In the dream, the doll kneels at a new grave among the hundreds already there, and prays for your worth in the waking world. The trophy for this ending reads, "You lived through the hunt and saw another day." This is the escape ending, the freedom ending, the one where the nightmare is over, and the sun has come up, and you are free and alive and somewhere beyond the reach of the dream. And if you accept it at face value, if you take the sunrise as the symbol it presents itself as and understand the doll's mourning as confirmation that you have genuinely departed, then yes, this is an escape. You are no longer a hunter of the dream. The contract is severed. You are mortal again. You can die for real now. But there are several things this reading ignores, and they collectively constitute a significant problem. First, you never found pale blood. You wrote a note before the transfusion reminding yourself to seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. In this ending, you have halted the beast scourge and survived the night, but have you transcended the hunt? You woke up in Yharnam on a morning after a catastrophic event, after a night in which the city's streets were filled with beasts and blood and cosmic horrors. You are a foreigner with no home there, no family, no connections beyond the nightmare you just survived. The pale blood you came seeking, the transcendence you wrote a note to remind yourself to pursue. You didn't achieve it. You were discharged before you accomplished your actual mission. This isn't liberation. This is retirement before the job is done. Second, consider the evidence of what happens to hunters who escape the dream this way. Eileen the Crow, retired hunter Djura. Both of them escaped. We'll examine their situations in detail in the next section, and neither of them found peace. Eileen became a hunter of hunters, tracking down and killing dream hunters who've gone blood drunk. Djura became a guardian of old Yharnam's beastly former inhabitants, manning his Gatling gun against anyone who would hunt what he now considers victims rather than monsters. Both of them are still hunting, still locked into some version of the role the dream built them for, even after escaping the immortality that defined it. The skills remain, the instincts remain, The drive to hunt remains. The dream lets you go but does not undo what it made of you. Third, there is the question of what you're waking into. The sunrise is beautiful, but Gehrman has just spent a night in which everything the Blood Moon's revelation implies actually happened. The people on those streets, however many survived, are traumatized, transformed, or dead. The beast's scourge hasn't ended. You've silenced Murgo, yes, but the blood ministration that causes the scourge continues. The healing church still operates. The old blood is still being distributed and consumed. The cycle will begin again. Future hunts will occur. Future hunters will be contracted. And you'll wake into that world as a mortal person in a city that is still fundamentally broken, having done nothing to address the systemic cause of what you survived. Fourth, and most philosophically troubling, the blood minister told you at the very beginning that you may think it all a mere bad dream. What if the sunrise ending is exactly that? What if you are escaping one dream only to awaken in another? The waking world of the Gehrman sunrise might be just another layer of the construct, another dream dreamed by something vaster. We'll address this at length when we get to the epistemological dimensions of Bloodborne's horror. But for now, the game never confirms that the sunrise represents genuine reality, rather than a comforting simulation of it. The ambiguity is maintained with deliberate care. This ending is freedom in the most minimal possible sense. The machine is done with you. It no longer needs your services. And so it releases you to deal, mortal and memory faded, with the consequences of what it made you do. That's not liberation. That's being laid off after your usefulness is exhausted. Honoring wishes. You become the Warden. The second ending occurs when you refuse Gehrman's offer and defeat him in combat, but have not consumed 3 1/3 umbilical cords. After you strike down the first hunter, a cutscene plays. You turn to look at the sky, and from the blood moon descends the moon presence itself. Flora, grotesque and beautiful, a writhing mass of pale flesh and tentacles with a void where a face should be. It floats down toward you and wraps its tendrils around your body. Then the screen fades. And when vision returns, you see the doll pushing a wheelchair through the hunter's dream, which continues to exist, somehow, despite Gehrman's death. In that wheelchair sits your character, positioned exactly as Gehrman was positioned for the entire game. The doll leans forward, and so the hunt begins again. The camera rises to show the blood moon ascending once more. You have taken Gehrman's place. The trophy is called Honoring Wishes, and its full text reads, "Captivated by the moon presence, you pledge to watch over the hunter's dream." It is among the most bitterly ironic names in gaming. Captivated. The word choice is precise and devastating, not chosen or ascended. Captivated. The moon presence has taken you. Whose wishes are being honored? Certainly not yours. You refused Gehrman's offer, because you didn't want to accept a death that felt like defeat, because some part of you believed fighting back was better than kneeling. And in fighting back, you claimed the very position Gehrman spent decades in agony trying to vacate. You have honored Gehrman's wish to be freed. Yes, by killing him, you gave him the death he begged for across what may have been centuries. You have honored the moon presence's wish for a new host, its need for someone to replace the one that finally got loose. You have honored the system's wish to perpetuate itself. You have not honored your own wishes. You will now spend an indefinitely long time, potentially forever, given what immortality means in the hunter's dream, in a wheelchair in a beautiful pocket dimension, welcoming the next generation of contracted hunters, guiding them toward their objectives, sending them out to die and return and die again, watching them struggle with the same choice you faced and made so catastrophically. You will hear yourself offering them what Gehrman offered you, the mercy of an ending. And when some of them refuse, when they stand and choose to fight you as you fought Gehrman, you will fight them. And the music that plays during that fight will swell with melancholy, not triumph, because you will understand exactly what you're doing. You are trying to save them from the thing they're about to become. You. The wheelchair is significant. The game never explains how or when Gehrman lost the use of his leg. It's one of many details Bloodborne withholds, leaving the imagination to fill the gap. But the wheelchair itself is a statement of his condition. He is diminished, constrained, limited in ways that his history as a legendary hunter makes all the more striking. The implied trajectory for you in this ending is the same arc. Centuries of sitting in the dream, watching hunters come and go, unable to leave, unable to die, will take their toll on you as they took their toll on him. You will age toward the same frailty. You will develop the same exhausted mumbling in your sleep. You will call out to people you once knew, hunters you cared about perhaps, who are now gone. And they will not come, and you will keep calling anyway. Because there is nothing else to do. This ending is not just, you become the new Gehrman. It is, you become exactly Gehrman. The nightmare is not a metaphor. It is a template. And you have just volunteered to fill it. Childhood's beginning. You become the architect. The third ending, the one requiring the most preparation, the most deliberate engagement with the game's deepest lore, is called Childhood's Beginning. To access it, you must have consumed 3 of the 4 available 1/3 umbilical cords scattered throughout Yarnum and its nightmare realms. These cords are grotesque relics. Physical remnants of failed pregnancies between humans and great ones, soaked in cosmic knowledge and power. Consuming them grants insight, but more than insight, they absorb you into a process of partial transformation, beginning your evolution towards something other than human. When you defeat Gehrman with 3 cords consumed and the moon presence descends to embrace you, something different happens. A brilliant light erupts from you, forcing Flora back. The Great One, surprised or perhaps offended, recovers and prepares to fight. You've resisted its attempt to absorb you into the role of dream host, and now it must deal with you more directly. The boss fight against the moon presence is mechanically intense, but its narrative function is the point. This is a being capable of creating entire pocket dimensions and maintaining them across centuries. A being that can bind hunters to immortality, orchestrate intricate systems of cosmic manipulation, and summon itself from the moon in a display of reality-warping power. And you can kill it. Your weapons, forged in the dream and powered by harvested blood echoes, can harm a god. When you land the killing blow, your body transforms. You become an infant Great One, a pale, slug-like creature, small enough for the doll to cradle in her arms. She picks you up gently, looks down at your new form and says, "Oh, good hunter." The trophy reads, "You became an infant Great One, lifting humanity into its next childhood." This is almost always called Bloodborne's true ending, the best ending, the transcendence ending, the one where you actually achieved what you came to Yarnum seeking. And in the narrowest sense, this is correct. You transcended the hunt. You were told to seek pale blood to transcend the hunt, and you have become something beyond the hunt, a cosmic entity, no longer subject to the mortality and the dreaming and the contracts that defined your existence as a hunter. But look at where you are. You are still in the hunter's dream. The doll is still there. The workshop still stands. The dream continues to function. You have not destroyed the dream by killing Flora. You have not dismantled the system. You have moved from the bottom of the hierarchy, contracted hunter, to the top of it, the Great One that maintains the entire construct. The moon presence used the dream to create and test potential surrogate children. You have become that child. You have inherited the dream. You are now responsible for it. What do you do now? You are an infant Great One. Infants, regardless of their cosmic nature, lack the maturity and experience to make informed decisions about complex systems. You have power without wisdom. You have transcended humanity, but not replaced it with anything more capable. And the dream surrounds you, operational and waiting, full of the systems you spent your entire playthrough navigating. The lamps, the blood echoes, the messengers, the headstones full of hunters' graves. All of it, now yours. Here is the most disturbing truth the game embeds in its best ending. Great Ones lose their children, always, and yearn for surrogates. It is one of Bloodborne's foundational rules. Ibritas mourns. Murgo's wet nurse attends a child's unending crying. The orphan of Kos screams into being from a dead god's corpse. Every great one you encounter is defined, in part, by loss, by the absence of a child they cannot have or cannot keep. The moon presence used the hunter's dream as a mechanism to find a surrogate. By ascending to Great One status, you have fulfilled that role, but now you will lose your child. That's the rule. And when you do, you will yearn for a surrogate. And what better mechanism for finding surrogates than the hunter's dream, which you now control? The cycle continues. Future hunters will be contracted. They will hunt in Yharnam. They will grow stronger through blood echoes. They will eventually face the choice you faced. And when some of them stand before you in that final garden beneath the great tree, and you offer them the blade, you will be Gehrman. You will have become the thing that trapped you. Your transcendence is real. But what you have transcended into is the role of architect for the very prison that made you. That is what happens when you achieve the best possible outcome in Bloodborne. You become the hunt's designer. The hunt continues. The night carries on forever. And somewhere deep in the logic of things, the moon presence's goals persist through you, because you are what the moon presence was. You are pale blood. You sought it to transcend the hunt. And transcendence means becoming the hunt's foundation rather than escaping it. To understand why all three endings fail to provide genuine escape, you need to understand the entity behind the entire system, the moon presence, Flora, the pale horror from beyond the moon that created the hunter's dream and orchestrated the machinery of your imprisonment. It is the final boss of two of the three endings, the silent overseer of the third, and the answer to the question that the game never explicitly poses: who built this cage and why? The moon presence is first referenced in a note found in the lecture building, written by an unknown scholar with a haunted understanding of what's happening in Yharnam. The nameless moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, pale blood. The note is brief, almost casual, as if the writer wants to set down this knowledge and move away from it quickly. But it contains everything. The moon presence was summoned, deliberately, by Lawrence, the first vicar of the healing church, working with a group whose full composition the game deliberately obscures, and it equates the moon presence with pale blood, the substance you came to Yharnam seeking. The note found in the lecture building states directly: the nameless moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, pale blood. That proximity, pale blood in the same clause as the moon presence, is everything. And Miyazaki, when asked about it in an interview, acknowledged the connection while hedging as he always does. Right, that's another interpretation. Pale blood is another name for the monster that comes from the moon. He framed it as another interpretation, rather than the canonical truth, leaving room for other readings. But the reading that the moon presence is pale blood, or at minimum its embodiment, is the one the lecture building note most directly supports. On this reading, the thing you wrote a note to remind yourself to seek is the cosmic entity that built your prison. Your goal and your captor, from the very first moment of the game, have always been the same. The moon presence is not native to Yharnam, or to what we might call the waking world. It exists in some higher dimensional space, connected to the blood moon that hangs in Yharnam's sky after Rom's concealment is lifted. When it descends in the game's ending sequences, it comes literally from the moon itself, suggesting that the moon functions as either its dwelling place or a gateway from its true location to the material plane. It is not of this world. It is not subject to this world's rules. And its appearance, when you finally confront it, makes this viscerally clear. A writhing mass of pale flesh, arranged in configurations that suggest human anatomy while violating every law of it. Tentacles where a face should be. Movement that defies physics and depth perception simultaneously. Flora bears unmistakable resemblance to Lovecraft's Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, the great old one, known for shape-shifting and for manipulating human civilization according to purposes that appear deliberate but resist comprehension. Whether Miyazaki intended this parallel explicitly, or whether it emerged from his acknowledged Lovecraft influence, is something he has declined to confirm. But the design logic reads the same either way. If we approach Flora through this lens, then trying to understand its motivations through human moral frameworks, through the categories of cruelty, benevolence, ambition, or strategy, may itself be an error. Nyarlathotep does not operate on human scales. Its actions appear purposeful because humans assume purpose behind every action, but the purposes, if they exist, run on timescales and across dimensions that render individual human suffering or joy equally irrelevant. What we can reconstruct from the evidence the game provides is something like this. The moon presence was summoned, possibly as part of an attempt by Lawrence and his associates to gain cosmic knowledge, to access the secrets of the Great Ones for purposes they imagined were their own. Once summoned, the moon presence did not return to wherever it came from. It stayed. It found in Gehrman a man in grief, isolated, desperate for companionship, willing to agree to almost anything, and it created the hunter's dream as a response to that need, binding Gehrman to the dream as its host, and creating the mechanism that would capture every hunter contracted through that system for as long as the dream persisted. But this is not, based on the available evidence, simply cruelty. The moon presence is not torturing hunters for entertainment. Its motivations appear to be more specific and, from the perspective of a Great One, arguably coherent, even if they look like horror from the perspective of those subjected to them. First, the dream creates immortal hunters who can fight the beast scourge indefinitely. The scourge is a genuine existential problem for Gehrman. People are transforming into monsters. Regular hunters can be killed permanently, which limits their effectiveness as a long-term solution. Hunters of the dream cannot be permanently killed. They can fall 1,000 times and return every time, accumulating knowledge and skill through each death, eventually overcoming even the most overwhelming enemies. The moon presence has created the most effective pest control mechanism imaginable. Second, the dream facilitates the killing of other Great Ones. Throughout your journey in Bloodborne, you kill an enormous number of Great Ones. Rom the vacuous spider, the celestial emissary, Abrites, Murgo's wet nurse, potentially the moon presence itself. A note in the lecture building implies this may be intentional. The moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates suggests a collaborative project, not an accident. If the moon presence is using hunters to eliminate rival or threatening Great Ones, then the entire hunter's dream is a cosmic military program with you as its soldier. Third, and this is where the lore converges most powerfully, the dream appears to be an apparatus for finding and cultivating a surrogate child. The Odin Writhe rune description states it plainly. Great Ones are sympathetic in spirit. They yearn pitifully for surrogates. That line alone begins to explain the dream's structure, and the evidence across the rest of the game bears it out. Ibrietas, who remained behind after the other Great Ones departed, mourns something. Grief shapes her entire presence in that church. The orphan of Kos was born screaming into a world without its mother, its grief and fury so profound it generated a cursed nightmare. Murgo's crying sustains the blood moon because no one has silenced that invisible infant. The pattern is consistent enough that it functions as a law. Great Ones lose children, or never have them, and their yearning for surrogates shapes everything they do. Every Great One is defined, in part, by absence. The moon presence is no different. By sending hunter after hunter into Gehrman, by exposing them to cosmic truths through insight, by feeding them umbilical cords if they find them, by building a system that rewards growth and persistence, and the willingness to engage with the game's deepest mysteries, the moon presence is running a selection process. It is testing candidates. It wants to know which of these contracted humans has the potential to transcend humanity entirely and become something worthy of being called a Great One's child. This interpretation explains the ending sequences with crystalline clarity. When you defeat Gehrman and the moon presence descends, if you haven't consumed 3 umbilical cords, you're not ready. You are powerful, but still fundamentally human, still a hunter, not yet something other. The moon presence binds you to the dream as the new host, giving you more time to accumulate insight and transformation. It is not punishing you. It is putting you back in the incubator. If you have consumed 3 umbilical cords, the transformation has already begun. When the moon presence embraces you, it is attempting to complete what the cords started, to shape you fully into the surrogate child it has been seeking. When you resist, when the power of the cords pushes back against the moon presence's will, Flora becomes hostile. The selection process has failed. The candidate rejected the offer, and so Flora attempts to eliminate what it cannot use, not out of cruelty, but out of the same cold logic that discards a defective tool. But if you prove strong enough to kill the moon presence itself, to destroy the Great One that created the system that created you, then you have transcended even the selection process. You have become a Great One through your own power, against the will of the entity that was trying to shape you. You have, in the most literal sense, graduated beyond the program designed to produce you. And then you inherit everything the program was. This is Flora's final, perfect trap. You cannot escape the system by defeating the system's architect, because defeating the architect makes you the architect. The moon presence is not a jailer you can overthrow. It is a role that continues to exist regardless of who occupies it. Kill it, and you become it. The cage does not need the original builder to remain a cage. It only needs someone to maintain it. The relationship between the moon presence and the blood moon reinforces this. The blood moon that rises after Rom's death is not simply an atmospheric phenomenon. It represents the partial manifestation of the moon presence in the waking world's sky, the Great One exerting its influence on Gehrman from the dimensional space connected to the moon, creating the conditions under which transformation is more likely, under which Great Ones can more readily interact with the material world, under which the selection process can operate most effectively. The blood moon is Flora watching, selecting, waiting. And when you look up at that blood moon, as you must, because it is enormous and ominous and inescapable in the game's late stages, you are looking at your jailer's eye. You have been watched from the beginning, evaluated, found either sufficient or insufficient, and whatever ending you reach, the moon presence has achieved something with you, whether that something is a new dream host, or a new Great One, or simply one more grave marker in the dream cemetery. There is one last thing about the moon presence that deserves examination. It is killable. In the childhood's beginning ending, you can fight it and win. For a being of its power and nature, this seems like it should mean something significant. It should mean that the ultimate source of your imprisonment has been destroyed, and the imprisonment ended, but the dream persists. The lamps remain. The messengers continue their rounds. The doll is still there, cradling the new infant Great One in her arms and saying, "Oh, good hunter," with the same warmth she's always had. The moon presence being dead changes nothing about the structure it built. The contractor is gone. The contract remains. This is not an oversight. It is the point. The system is more durable than the entity that designed it. The cage outlasts the builder. And whoever occupies the role of Great One in the dream going forward, you, presumably, will maintain the system through their very existence, because that's what the role demands. You can kill God. The church keeps running. Among all the hunters you encounter in Gehrman, during the long nightmare of the hunt, 2 stand apart from the rest, in a way that is easy to miss, if you're moving quickly through the game's world. Eileen the Crow and retired hunter Djura have both achieved something that the game positions as extraordinarily rare. They escaped the hunter's dream. They are no longer immortal hunters bound by contract to the system. They can die permanently. They have been, in the most basic sense, freed. Examining what their freedom actually looks like is perhaps the most sobering thing you can do in Bloodborne, because it illustrates that escape is possible, and that escape, when it finally arrives, does not look like anything you've been hoping for. Eileen the Crow is a hunter of hunters, someone who specializes in tracking down and killing other hunters who have succumbed to blood-drunk madness, who have lost themselves so thoroughly in the hunt that they've become indistinguishable from the beasts they were contracted to kill. She wears a distinctive crow-feather cloak and speaks with the measured calm of someone who has seen far too much to be easily disturbed. When you first encounter her in central Gehrman, she's fighting Henrik, a hunter who has gone mad, and handling the situation with professional efficiency. Eileen knows the hunter's dream. She speaks of it with the familiarity of someone who has lived in it. She knows what you are as a hunter of the dream, and she has specific knowledge that suggests she understands the mechanics of the system, the doll, the workshop, the cycles of death and resurrection that define the dream's logic. This is not second-hand knowledge. This is the knowledge of someone who was inside the system and found her way out. How she escaped is never explicitly stated. The most coherent reading, based on her dialogue, is that she completed her contract, that she fulfilled whatever obligation bound her to the dream to Gehrman's satisfaction, and was released, the same way Gehrman offers to release you if you accept his mercy. She accepted the death, she woke somewhere in Gehrman, and she was free. But free to do what? Eileen cannot simply lay down her weapons and live a normal life in this city. Something in her, the skills the dream spent years or decades perfecting, the reflexes and instincts built through countless cycles of violent death and resurrection, the hunter's nature that has become inseparable from her identity, cannot be set aside. She is still hunting. She has redirected her hunting from beasts to hunters, which is a meaningful moral distinction, but it is not a departure from hunting. She is still, fundamentally, what the dream made her. She will say this directly if you speak with her at the right moments. When she kills you, she remarks, "I should think you still have dreams." Well, next time you dream, give some thought to the hunt and its purpose. She knows what the dream is. She knows you'll return to it. And she uses that knowledge not to mock you, but to challenge you, to see what you do with the time the dream is still giving you. What Eileen knows with the certainty of someone who lived through the dream and made it out is that the hunt seduces, that the blood and the secrets and the power it offers are a trap as real as any contract. And the only cure for the madness it produces is an honest death, not the cycling, endlessly reset deaths of the dream, but a real one. She is advocating for the very thing she once escaped, an honest death as liberation. The difference is that now, freed from the dream, she is mortal again. The death she encourages in others is also the death waiting for her. Any night, any hunt, any blood-drunk hunter could be her last. She has accepted this. She finds it not frightening but honest, preferable to the endless resurrection of the dream, the way that one more death just means one more return rather than any kind of conclusion. Her freedom is this: the ability to end, to finish, to reach a conclusion rather than repeating indefinitely. Djura is a different study in the cost of release. He guards old Gehrman from atop his tower with a Gatling gun, and his first instinct when he sees you is to drive you away with overwhelming firepower. He is protecting the beasts below, the former inhabitants of old Gehrman, who survived the burning in the years since, transformed but not, in Djura's view, gone. His actual words, when you approach him peacefully after the right conditions have been met, are direct and uncomfortably clear. Yes, very good. I no longer dream, but I was once a hunter too. And then, there's nothing more horrific than a hunt. In case you fail to realize, the things you hunt, they're not beasts, they're people. One day, you will see. He no longer dreams. That phrase is the anchor. It places him in exactly the same category as Eileen, a former hunter of the dream, now mortal, now vulnerable, now no longer cycling through the endless resurrection of the contract. And like Eileen, he hasn't used his freedom to find peace. He's used it to take up a different, equally consuming vigil. The burning of old Gehrman is the most likely catalyst for Djura's break with the hunt. His armor description confirms it plainly. Djura felt defeated by the state of old Gehrman and renounced his hunter's vows. Old Gehrman was burned. The healing church hunters set it alight to contain the beast plague before it could spread, and Djura was present for it, wearing what became the charred hunter set. He saw what the hunt required of him, burning buildings with people still inside them, because those people had been infected, because the calculus of the hunt said, infected equals beast equals acceptable loss. Something in him refused to continue making that calculus. He stopped. He renounced his vows. He walked back down into the ruins he'd helped create, and he has been there since, protecting what remains of the people the hunt burned. He escaped the dream through that refusal. Whether through completing his contract on his own terms, or through some other mechanism the game doesn't specify, he is no longer immortal. He is stationed in that tower, alone, aging, unable to leave without abandoning the creatures he has sworn to protect. He has escaped the dream and immediately built himself another cage. His new prison is one he chose, built from guilt and grief, and the need to atone for what the hunt made him do. But he is still imprisoned by his past, still defined entirely by the role the dream assigned him, even as he tries to invert it, protecting beasts instead of killing them, but still organizing his entire existence around the hunt. Both Eileen and Djura illustrate a truth that the game communicates subtly but consistently. The dream lets you go, but does not undo what it made of you. The skills remain, the reflexes remain. The psychological architecture of being a hunter, the instincts that organize experience around threats and countermeasures, and the fundamental violence of the hunt remains. You can escape the immortality. You cannot escape the person the immortality built. There is also the matter of memory. Both Eileen and Djura retain clear enough knowledge of the dream to reference it explicitly in dialogue. Eileen mentions the doll by name. Djura states plainly that he no longer dreams. The game does not support the idea that they've fully forgotten their time there. What the Yharnam Sunrise ending tells us is that Gehrman says you will die, forget the dream, and awake under the morning sun. So at minimum, some degree of forgetting occurs. But how much remains genuinely unclear from the evidence. Eileen and Djura remember enough to know what you're going through, enough to offer wisdom drawn from experience, whether the deeper specifics, the precise mechanics, the intimate knowledge that might let someone dismantle the system from outside. Whether that persists or fades is something the game leaves open, and honestly, that ambiguity may be the point. The cage doesn't need to scrub your memory completely. It only needs to ensure that what you remember won't help you undo it. What we can conclude from Eileen and Djura, from the only two confirmed successful escapees in a cemetery of hundreds of graves, is this. Escape is extraordinarily rare. The survival rate of the hunter's dream, measured as the ratio of hunters who complete their contracts and return to mortality against hunters who die permanently in the waking world, go blood drunk, or end up as grave markers, appears to be catastrophically low. Hundreds of hunters, possibly thousands, over the centuries the dream has operated, and we meet exactly two who got out while retaining the agency to function as independent actors in Yharnam's world. 2. From potentially thousands. That is a success rate approaching 0. That is not a lottery you enter hoping to win. That is a lottery that you might win if you are extraordinarily lucky, and the prize is the freedom to continue hunting something, because hunting is the only thing you know how to do anymore. But at least their story ends. At least it reaches a conclusion. In a universe defined by eternal recurrence, by the night that carries on forever, the dream that perpetuates itself across centuries, the cycle that the moon presents designed to be unbreakable, the ability to finish is not nothing. It might, in fact, be the closest thing to victory that Bloodborne's universe permits. If you think the hunter's dream represents the worst that Bloodborne's architecture of imprisonment has to offer, the Old Hunter's DLC reveals something that makes the dream look merciful by comparison. The Hunter's Nightmare is a cursed realm where hunters who committed the gravest atrocities are imprisoned for eternity, reliving their sins in a purgatory of endless violence and blood, with no Gehrman offering mercy, no doll offering warmth, no exit condition that doesn't require someone from outside the nightmare to sever the curse at its root. The Hunter's Nightmare exists as a warning. It is what happens when the hunt is taken too far, when the line between hunter and beast is not merely blurred but erased, when hunters forget that the beasts they kill were once human beings deserving of consideration, when the pursuit of cosmic knowledge justifies any action, no matter how monstrous. Access to the nightmare requires a specific ritual. After defeating Vicar Amelia, a corpse appears in the hunter's dream, holding the eye of a blood-drunk hunter. This eye allows you to perceive a lesser amygdala that was always present but invisible near the cathedral ward. When this amygdala grabs you, a gesture that normally kills you, it transports you instead into the hunter's nightmare, a twisted reflection of Yharnam where the architecture you know has been warped, broken, and overgrown with grotesque organic matter until it resembles a fever dream of the city rather than the city itself. The first thing you notice is the hunters. Everywhere in the nightmare, you encounter old hunters, human hunters wearing the garb of Gehrman's workshop, wielding the trick weapons of a previous era, fighting with the skill of long-experienced killers. They attack you on sight, without hesitation or apparent purpose. They are blood-drunk. They have been blood-drunk for so long that the distinction between them and the beasts they once hunted has become meaningless. They are perfectly preserved in their madness, unable to die permanently, unable to recover from what the hunt made them, reliving the violence of their worst moments in a landscape frozen at the instant of its worst horror. Simon the Harrowed, one of the few NPCs in the nightmare who retains enough sanity to speak, explains the nature of the place with a directness that cuts through the mystery. Do you know why the hunters are drawn to this nightmare? Because it sprouted from their very misdeeds, things that some would rather keep secret. A pitiful tale of petty arrogance, really. High time someone exposed the whole charade. The nightmare was not created by the moon presence or by some external cosmic entity. It was created by the hunters themselves, by the accumulated weight of what they did in the fishing hamlet. Simon calls their sin petty arrogance. Not grand tragedy, not noble sacrifice gone wrong, but arrogance. The conviction that cosmic knowledge could be taken without consequence, that a people could be slaughtered for their proximity to a dead god, and that no reckoning would follow. The fishing hamlet massacre is the original sin of Bloodborne's hunter tradition. Gehrman, Maria, and other hunters of the old workshop traveled to this isolated coastal settlement where a great one, the one the game simply calls Kos, had washed ashore, dead or dying. They slaughtered the inhabitants, fishermen, and their families who had the misfortune of proximity to the divine. The hunters plundered the hamlet for eyes and umbilical cords and cosmic knowledge, dissecting Kos herself in pursuit of arcane secrets. Her unborn child, the orphan of Kos, was torn from her womb or born at the moment of her death, depending on how one reads the opening cutscene of that fight, and from the dying curse of Kos, or from some deeper mechanism of the universe's sense of justice. A punishment descended on every hunter who participated. They would be imprisoned in the nightmare forever, hunting in a landscape frozen at the moment of its worst horror. Ludwig, the Holy Blade, is there. The legendary hunter who succeeded Gehrman and founded the Healing Church Workshop, who carried the Holy Moonlight Sword and trained an entire generation of church hunters in the service of a purpose he genuinely believed was righteous, has been transformed into a grotesque beast. He is barely recognizable as once human, his body twisted into something horse-like and monstrous, his mind shattered by however long he has spent in the nightmare. He still clutches his Holy Moonlight Sword in his second phase, the great arcane blade that was synonymous with him, and that church hunters could only approximate with replicas. He still rants about guidance and light. He still believes, in the fragments of coherence that remain, that he is serving something noble. When you defeat him and speak to his severed head in the moments of clarity that follow, the tragedy of his situation emerges fully. He asks about the church hunters. He wants to know if they still maintain their honor and purpose. You can lie to give him comfort or tell him the truth. Either way, the lucidity doesn't last. He slips back. His final moments are consumed by uncertainty about whether his life's work meant anything at all, or whether he was always just another blood-drunk hunter who couldn't stop killing long enough to see what the hunt had made of him. Lady Maria is there. Maria, Gehrman's student, the woman whose likeness he gave to the doll, the hunter from Canehurst who was horrified by the fishing hamlet massacre and threw away her weapon and swore off hunting entirely to become a caretaker of the research hall's patients, is in the hunter's nightmare, guarding the path to the fishing hamlet. Her attempts at redemption did not save her. Her decision to dedicate herself to caring for the people the Healing Church's experiments had damaged did not exempt her from the curse she earned at the hamlet. She is there, unchanged from the moment of her death or disappearance, condemned to guard the path to the scene of the crime she tried to atone for. When you fight Maria, she uses the very techniques she swore never to use again, the blood magic, the combat arts she learned from a tradition she rejected, because the nightmare doesn't let her be the person she chose to become after the hamlet. It holds her at the worst version of herself, the version that existed at the moment the curse was earned, and it forces her to keep being that version forever. This is the deepest horror of the hunter's nightmare. It doesn't just imprison you, it freezes you at your worst. It takes the moment of greatest sin and makes it eternal, not as punishment in any theological sense, but as a kind of cosmic record. This is what you did, this is what you were, and this is what you will always be in this space. And the orphan of Kos is there, somehow both dead and alive, born screaming into a world without its mother, forced to re-experience that birth and that abandonment again and again, in a hut on the shore of a hamlet that never stops burning. When you fight it, the game does everything it can to make you feel like the villain. This is not a beast threatening humanity. This is a newborn, confused and terrified and furious. When you kill it, you are replicating the act that created the nightmare in the first place. You are being the hunters at the hamlet, and the game knows it, and it makes sure you know it too. After you defeat the orphan, the haunting image of the game's DLC ending resolves into something close to closure. Simon the Harrowed, if he has survived, delivers a prayer that frames what just happened, though by this point, you may not be certain who is being addressed or who is listening. If the curse has been lifted, the hunters trapped in the nightmare may finally be allowed to truly die, to be released from what they could not escape alone. It is the closest thing Bloodborne offers to mercy delivered through violence. An act of killing that ends suffering rather than perpetuating it. But the important question for our purposes is not how the nightmare ends. It is what the nightmare means for you, as a hunter of the dream, standing at the edge of the choices we've discussed in this video. The hunter's nightmare demonstrates that there are fates worse than the hunter's dream, prisons within prisons, nightmares beneath nightmares. If you hunt too enthusiastically, kill too indiscriminately, pursue cosmic knowledge with too much disregard for the humanity of those in your path, you risk something like what Ludwig and Maria and the blood-drunk hunters in the nightmare are experiencing. The cosmic forces of Bloodborne's universe keep accounts. Curses generated by atrocities can last for generations, affecting not just the original perpetrators but anyone who follows their tradition. You are following their tradition. Every time you kill an enemy in Old Gehrman, you are doing what the hunters of the nightmare did, in the streets they walked, with the tools they developed. The game is watching whether you can maintain the distinction between hunting and massacre, whether you can hold on to some awareness that the beasts were people, that the violence has costs beyond your blood echoes and your level progression. The hunter's nightmare is Bloodborne's answer to the question, what if you hunt too much? The dream is where hunters who try to escape the hunt end up. The nightmare is where hunters who surrender to it end up. You are caught between two prisons, and the narrow path that doesn't lead to one of them requires a kind of consciousness that the game's systems are continuously working to erode. The existence of the nightmare also tells us something about the structure of escape that the rest of the game obscures. The dream is escapable. In principle, Eileen and Djura got out. The nightmare is not escapable from the inside. It requires external intervention. Someone must come in from outside, navigate to the source of the curse, and sever it through combat. The people trapped in the nightmare cannot free themselves. They are utterly dependent on the mercy of someone who hasn't yet been trapped. This is the most complete expression of what the hunt does to hunters. It makes them dependent on someone outside the system for any chance of release, while simultaneously building the system to trap whoever comes to help. Every hunter of the dream who enters the nightmare to end the curse is taking the risk of ending up trapped there themselves, of adding their name to the long list of hunters who came to help and found only a deeper cage waiting. We have examined the contract, the mechanics, the dream, Gehrman, the three endings, the moon presence, the escapees, and the nightmare. We have mapped the cage from multiple angles and examined every door, but there is one final dimension of Bloodborne's inescapable trap that is more disturbing than all of the above, because it undermines the very possibility of knowing whether any of the above analysis is correct. It is the game's epistemological horror. The question of whether anything you experience in Bloodborne is actually real, or whether the entire structure is a dream within a dream with no outside. The Blood Minister tells you at the very beginning, you may think it all a mere bad dream, This early warning establishes the interpretive framework the game will spend its entire runtime exploiting. Everything you experience, the beasts, the great ones, the hunter's dream, the blood moon, the cosmic transformations, could all be hallucination, delirium induced by the blood transfusion. Your mind's response to whatever illness drove you to Yarnam in the first place. The grotesque content of a fever dream experienced by someone dying in a clinic, somewhere in a city they don't know, far from home. This interpretation has surface plausibility. It would explain the impossibility of the things you encounter. It would explain the way the laws of physics and biology seem to flex and break around the hunt's more extreme elements. It would explain the hunter's dream itself, a pocket dimension accessed through death, that works on completely different rules than the waking world. Perhaps that's exactly what it is. The kind of thing a dying mind would construct to make sense of its own dissolution. But Bloodborne is not that kind of story. It does not offer the comfortable out of, it was all a dream. The evidence accumulates against that reading throughout the game, and by the end it is overwhelming. Something happened. Something was real. The Yarnam sunrise ending shows you waking in clothes from the dream, not the clothes you arrived in. The costume has changed because the body changed, because whatever happened in the dream had physical consequences in the waking world. The doll mourns at your grave in the dream, confirming that from her perspective, you were real and you died. Eileen and Djura exist in Yarnam with knowledge of the dream that could not have been constructed from outside it. But, and this is the crucial but, Bloodborne does not establish that dreams and nightmares are not real. It establishes that they are real in a specific and disturbing way. They are genuine locations that exist parallel to the waking world, subject to different rules, accessible through different mechanisms, but no less physically present for all that. The hunter's dream is a dream, and it is real. The hunter's nightmare is a nightmare, and it is real. You can die in both. You can find items in both. Both have inhabitants with their own experiences and histories and grief. This means the question isn't, was it a dream versus, was it real? The question is, what does real mean? In a universe where dreams and nightmares are genuine places you can visit and die in, and the answer, within Bloodborne's cosmology, appears to be something like, consciousness is more fundamental than physical matter. Reality is not one layer. It is many layers, coexisting, overlapping, running on different rules at different depths. The great ones who exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously perceive all of these layers at once. Humans, with their limited spatial perception and their linear experience of time, can only ever perceive the layer they're currently in. The hunter's dream is a dream layer. The waking world is a waking layer. The hunter's nightmare is a nightmare layer. Each is equally real from within. Each appears differently from outside. And the moon presence, existing in whatever dimensional space the moon represents in Bloodborne's cosmology, can see all of them simultaneously and move between them at will. Now consider what this means for your escape attempts. The Yarnam sunrise ending shows you waking as the sun rises. You interpret this as waking in the real Yarnam, in the baseline layer of reality, freed from the dream layer that held you. But the game has established that the distinction between real and dream is far blurrier than your intuition suggests. The waking world you've entered might be exactly what it appears, the genuine, unadorned layer of material reality. Or it might be another construct, another layer of dream, designed to feel like escape while maintaining the fundamental entrapment. A dream that says, you're free now, as its opening image rather than, welcome, hunter. The game never confirms which of these is true. The ambiguity is maintained not through oversight but through precision. Miyazaki and his team are not uncertain about what happens in the Yarnam sunrise ending. They have chosen to leave it uncertain to you, the player, the hunter, because that uncertainty is part of the horror. You can never be sure you've actually escaped rather than graduated to a higher resolution version of the same trap. This is the epistemological dimension of the nightmare. The cage has no outside that can be verified from the inside. To know that you've genuinely escaped, You would need a reference point that exists outside all possible layers of the dream, some neutral ground from which you could look back and confirm, yes, that was the cage and this is freedom. But every possible vantage point is itself within something. Every experience is filtered through your consciousness, which has been altered by the blood transfusion, by the accumulation of insight, by the deaths and resurrections and cosmic revelations of the hunt. You cannot trust your perception as a neutral instrument. It has been modified by the very system you're trying to evaluate. The Lovecraftian, philosophical underpinning of Bloodborne makes this explicit. In Lovecraft's cosmology, the moment humans discover the true nature of reality, the actual scale of the universe, the real relationships between consciousness and existence, the way the entities that matter regard human civilization as approximately relevant, they break, not because the truth is painful in any simple sense, but because the architecture of the human mind, built for survival in a limited world, simply cannot accommodate the genuine complexity of what exists. The mind encounters a truth too large for its structure and collapses under the weight. Bloodborne extends this. The more insight you carry, the more vulnerable you become to frenzy, to the madness of knowing too much, of perceiving what human cognition was not built to perceive. The game is telling you, in mechanical language, that your growing understanding of your imprisonment makes you more likely to be destroyed by the knowledge of it. Ignorance is protective. Understanding is lethal. And if this is true, if the nature of the trap is such that understanding it destroys you, then what does this say about the project of escaping it? To escape, you need to understand. To understand, you need insight. To have insight, you are vulnerable to frenzy. To survive frenzy, you need to not understand too deeply. The prison is locked from the inside by the very faculty that might unlock it. Cognition, applied to the question of the cage, becomes a weapon against the person applying it. The final, most complete version of this horror is the question the note poses. Seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. Transcendence, in its philosophical sense, means rising above, moving to a higher level of existence or understanding. But what if the levels never end? What if transcending the hunt merely means joining a higher level hunt? The cosmic hunting that great ones conduct across dimensional spaces, seeking each other, seeking children, seeking whatever incomprehensible objectives animate entities of such power. What if the childhood's beginning-ending is not liberation but promotion, not an escape from the game but an invitation to play at a higher difficulty, in a larger arena, against opponents more formidable than anything Gehrman had to offer? Bloodborne never answers this. The credits roll, and you are left with an infant, great one in the arms of a doll, who calls you good hunter. And the word hunter is still there, still applied, still defining. The hunt does not stop being a hunter. The name of what you are has not changed, only the scale at which you operate. That is the epistemological trap. You cannot verify that you have escaped. You cannot confirm that any ending represents genuine liberation rather than relocation. You cannot step outside the system to look back at it. Because there is nowhere outside. The universe of Bloodborne is, in the tradition of the Lovecraftian cosmic horror that inspired it, a closed system, nested layers of reality with no exit, only different rooms within the same infinite and inescapable structure. You may think it all a mere bad dream. But in this universe, a bad dream is just another kind of real. After everything we've examined, the contracts signed before understanding, the mechanics designed to perpetuate the hunt, the beautiful cage of the hunter's dream, Gehrman's centuries of trapped grief, the three endings that are three versions of continued imprisonment, the moon presence's alien purposes, the terrible cost of release, the nightmare that awaits the worst hunters, and the epistemological impossibility of verifying any escape, we have arrived at Bloodborne's darkest and most complete truth. You cannot escape the hunt, because the hunt is not a place you're trapped in. It is a thing you have become. This is not a poetic overstatement. It is a literal description of what the contract, the blood transfusion, the dream, and the cumulative transformation of the hunt have done to you. When you first arrived in Gehrman, there was a you that existed before the hunt. A traveler from foreign shores, seeking a cure or a substance or a transcendence for reasons the game deliberately obscures, arriving in a strange city with a specific purpose and a self that existed independent of the systems about to consume it. That person signed the contract and went under the needle and woke up in the clinic. Everything that happened after that point was the hunt transforming the raw material of your pre-hunt self into something perfectly shaped for its purposes. Every death that taught you to fight more effectively was the hunt refining your weapon. Every resurrection that returned you to the dream was the hunt taking inventory and preparing the next deployment. Every blood echo that leveled up your attributes was the hunt converting the harvested fragments of dead humanity into improved specifications for the tool it was shaping. Every cosmic revelation that increased your insight was the hunt upgrading your threat assessment systems, even as it made you more vulnerable to the madness of knowing. By the time you reach the garden with Gehrman, by the time you have fought through all of Yharnam's nightmares and killed all of its great ones and accumulated all of the power and knowledge the game rewards, you are not the person who signed the contract. You are what the contract was designed to produce: a hunter, an instrument, a tool so perfectly shaped to its purpose that the tool no longer has a self that exists independent of that purpose. This is why all three endings fail to provide genuine escape. You cannot escape what you have become by changing your location or your role or your cosmic status. Moving from contracted hunter to dream's host to infant great one changes the coordinates of your imprisonment without changing its nature. You are still a hunter, operating within the hunt's logic, organized according to the hunt's imperatives, unable to imagine an existence that isn't structured around the categories and concerns and compulsions that the hunt built into you. Eileen is still hunting. Djura is still hunting. Gehrman hunted even in his sleep, calling out to companions from his hunting days, dreaming of the hunt he couldn't stop performing even across centuries of servitude. Maria threw away her weapon and swore off hunting, and still ended up in the hunter's nightmare, fighting with the techniques she renounced, because the hunt followed her into the cursed realm where she ended up. The hunt follows everyone. It builds itself into the structure of the self so thoroughly that removing it would require removing the self entirely. The note says, "Seek pale blood to transcend the hunt." And in the childhood's beginning ending, you become pale blood. You literally become the substance the note referenced, the great one that the note named. You have achieved the transcendence the note promised. But transcendence means rising above something, which implies that the thing you've risen above still exists below you. You have transcended the hunt by ascending to the position of its architect. The hunt is still there, still operating, still trapping hunters, still grinding through its eternal cycle, and you are now responsible for it. You didn't escape the trap, you became the trap. Consider the game's title, not Bloodborne, The Hunt, or Bloodborne, Yharnam's Nightmare, just Bloodborne. Bloodborne, carried by blood. Blood is the medium through which everything in this world moves. The ministration, the beast scourge, the transformation, the echoes, the cosmic transformation. You are bloodborne. You are carried by the blood, transported by it from your previous existence into the hunter's existence, borne along by it whether you consent or resist. As long as blood flows through you, you are part of the hunt's economy. You are feedstock and output simultaneously, both raw material and product, both prisoner and building material of the cage. The mechanic that expresses this most perfectly is the one that punishes players most harshly and that players complain about most vocally, the blood echo loss on death. When you die and drop your echoes and then die again before recovering them, those fragments of accumulated experience are gone. They don't simply disappear. They are absorbed by the environment, by the enemy that killed you, by Yharnam itself. The hunt takes what you couldn't hold on to, and then it requires you to kill more enemies to replace what it took, keeping you perpetually in the position of hunting, because hunting is the only way to rebuild what the hunt costs you. This is not cruelty. It is design. The hunt is designed to perpetuate itself through you, to make its perpetuation the condition of your survival within it. And this design has been so thoroughly internalized by the end of a playthrough that most players never notice it as design at all. They notice it as the way things work, which is exactly what the best cages feel like to the people inside them. Bloodborne's genius, its genuine, lasting artistic achievement, is that it has built an experience that enacts rather than merely describes its theme. Most horror games describe horror. Bloodborne creates it through the mechanics themselves. The loop of death and resurrection is not a metaphor for being trapped in an inescapable system. It is the inescapable system. The blood echo economy is not a symbol of the hunt's self-perpetuating nature. It is that nature expressed in the grammar of gameplay. You do not read about the cage. You experience its bars as the rules of the world you inhabit, and you learn to navigate within them as though they were natural law, because within this world, they are. And then, much later, if you're paying attention, if you find the note in the workshop, if you hear Gehrman sleep-talking, if you watch the doll pray over the graves, if you reach the garden and hear Gehrman offer you a clean death as the most merciful thing he can give, the horror arrives. Not as jump scare, not as grotesque imagery, not as a monster too large to fight, as recognition. The recognition that the thing you spent 30 hours navigating, the loop you ran hundreds of times, the system you mastered and moved through with increasing fluency, that was the trap, and you mastered it by becoming part of it. And your mastery means you are now, in every meaningful sense, the hunt's most successful product. The note says, seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. You transcend the hunt by becoming the hunt's foundation. You find pale blood by becoming pale blood. The goal and the destination are the same. The end of seeking is the thing you were seeking, and the thing you were seeking was the thing that trapped you. The night and the dream are long, hunter. They were long before you arrived, and they will be long after whatever version of you persists beyond the ending you choose. The hunt is not a temporary condition. It is not a crisis to be resolved. It is the permanent structure of this universe, embedded in the blood that flows through everything, maintained by the cosmic machinery of a great one's alien purposes, perpetuated by every hunter who passes through the dream and either escapes into a different kind of hunting or becomes part of the machinery itself. May the good blood guide your way, and may you understand, before the blade falls or the tentacles embrace you or the transformation begins, that the question was never whether you could find the exit. The cage is not built like that. The question was always what kind of prisoner you intended to be. And the most terrifying answer in Bloodborne's universe is also its most honest. By the time you understand the question, you've already become the answer. The hunt is eternal. The dream persists. You sought pale blood to transcend the hunt, and pale blood was never going to set you free. Thank you for watching, hunters. If this deep dive into Bloodborne's architecture of imprisonment resonated with you, please leave a like and subscribe for more explorations of the cosmic horror buried in From Software's work. The hunt may be eternal in Gehrman, but here in the real world, we can still choose when to step away, though something in the blood keeps drawing us back. Until next time, fear the old blood. And remember, some cages are so perfectly designed that you build them yourself, one death at a time.